Have you ever noticed that the people who claim to value kindness the most are often the first to take advantage of it? You listen when others need someone. You make compromises to keep the peace. You give people the benefit of the doubt. Yet somehow, instead of earning more respect, you find yourself being ignored, overlooked, interrupted, or treated as though your needs matter less than everyone else's. And after enough of these experiences, a question begins to form in the back of your mind. If kindness is such a strength, why does it so often seem to invite disrespect? Part of what makes this confusing is that you never intended to become the person who gets taken for granted. In fact, your kindness often came from good intentions. You wanted to be understanding, fair, patient. You believed that if you treated people well, they would naturally do the same in return. So when someone ignored your boundaries, dismissed your efforts, or seemed to expect more and more from you without appreciation, it felt deeply unfair. Not because you expected praise, but because you expected basic respect. And the more this happened, the harder it became to understand what you were doing wrong. The mistake most people make is assuming that kindness and weakness are opposites. They are not. Weakness is not kindness. Weakness is the inability to protect your own interests when necessary. Kindness is a choice, and choices only have value when they could have been made differently. Think about it this way. If someone cannot say no, their yes means very little. If someone cannot enforce a boundary, their generosity stops being generosity and starts becoming compliance. And this is where the misunderstanding often begins. What many people call kindness is actually something else entirely. It is fear disguised as virtue. The fear of disappointing people. The fear of conflict. The fear of being seen as selfish. So they say yes when they want to say no. They remain silent when something bothers them. They tolerate behavior they know they shouldn't accept. And because the behavior looks polite from the outside, they convince themselves they are being kind. But deep down, they often feel resentment building, which raises an uncomfortable question. If your kindness consistently leaves you feeling drained, is it really kindness at all? The reason this question matters is because people do not judge you only by your intentions. They judge you by your behavior. And behavior communicates information whether you want it to or not. When you repeatedly sacrifice your own needs to accommodate everyone else, most people do not see hidden generosity. They see a person who is willing to absorb costs that others refuse to absorb. Over time, that becomes the new expectation. Not because people consciously decide to disrespect you, but because human beings naturally adapt to the standards you repeatedly accept. Which means the real issue may not be your kindness at all. It may be the signals your kindness is sending. Most people never notice this process happening because it unfolds slowly. The first time someone asks for a favor, you help. The second time, you help again. Eventually, what began as generosity becomes routine. Then one day, you finally decide to protect your time, and the reaction surprises you. People who were perfectly comfortable benefiting from your kindness suddenly act disappointed, frustrated, or even offended. And that moment feels confusing because you expected gratitude. Instead, you encounter resistance. But what if that reaction reveals something important about how human nature actually works? The uncomfortable truth is that people often value what they believe could be withdrawn. Not because they are evil, not because they are consciously manipulative, but because scarcity creates awareness. Think about how often something goes unnoticed until it disappears. Your time, your attention, your effort, your availability. When these things are constantly available, people stop viewing them as choices. They start viewing them as part of the environment. And once that happens, your kindness no longer feels like a gift. It feels like something they are entitled to receive. Which leads to a deeper question. Why do some kind people inspire respect while others quietly lose it? The difference is not kindness, the difference is boundaries. Respect is not created by being difficult, aggressive, or emotionally cold. It is created when people understand that your kindness exists alongside limits. A person who can say no carries a different presence than a person who cannot. A person who can walk away carries a different presence than a person who always stays. And people sense this long before it is ever spoken aloud. Which means the question is not whether you are kind. The question is whether your kindness is backed by strength. Many people assume strength means becoming harder, colder, or less caring. So after being taken advantage of enough times, they swing to the opposite extreme. They stop helping. They stop trusting. They stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. But this rarely solves the problem. It simply replaces one imbalance with another. The goal is not to abandon kindness. The goal is to remove the weakness that has attached itself to it. Because the strongest people are often not the least kind. They are the most selective about where their kindness goes. What makes this difficult is that your idealized version of kindness was probably built on a simple belief. If I am good to people, they will be good to me. And sometimes that happens, but often it doesn't. Because human beings do not automatically reward sacrifice. In fact, when sacrifice becomes predictable, many people stop noticing it altogether. This is why some of the most generous people quietly become the most resentful. They keep giving, expecting appreciation to appear eventually, while the people around them gradually come to see that giving as normal. And once something becomes normal, it often stops being valued. This is why the belief that kindness automatically creates respect can become dangerous. Respect is not simply a reward for good intentions. Respect is often a response to perceived standards. People watch what you tolerate. They watch what you accept. They watch how you respond when someone crosses a line. And whether they realize it or not, they learn how to treat you from those moments. Which means two people can be equally kind while receiving completely different treatment from the world. Not because one is better, but because one has taught people where the limits are and the other has not. The deeper issue is that many people confuse being liked with being respected. They assume the two naturally come together, but they often do not. Someone may appreciate your willingness to help while having very little respect for your boundaries. Someone may enjoy your generosity while quietly assuming you will continue giving regardless of how they behave. This is why being the most accommodating person in the room does not always translate into influence or respect. Sometimes it creates the opposite, because when people become convinced that access to you requires no effort, they stop treating that access as something valuable. There is another reason this pattern is so difficult to see while you're living it. The more kind and accommodating you are, the more you assume other people are operating from the same principles. You assume they notice the sacrifices you're making. You assume they appreciate the effort. You assume they would do something similar for you if the situation were reversed. But people do not experience your intentions. They experience your behavior. And when your behavior consistently communicates unlimited availability, many people stop seeing generosity and start seeing access. That distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. What becomes even more interesting is that the people who take advantage of kindness are not always consciously malicious. Sometimes they are simply responding to incentives. If one person always says yes and another sometimes says no, who do people ask first? If one person always makes themselves available and another protects their time, who ends up carrying more of the burden? Human beings naturally move toward the path of least resistance. And if you consistently make yourself the easiest option, you may accidentally train people to depend on your kindness without ever truly valuing it, which leads to an uncomfortable realization. Sometimes the problem is not what people are doing. Sometimes it is what your behavior has taught them to expect. And this is where many people encounter a belief gap that changes everything. They assume that setting boundaries will make them less kind, that saying no will make them selfish, that protecting their time will make them difficult. But the opposite is often true. Boundaries are what preserve genuine kindness. Without them, kindness slowly turns into obligation. And anything done from obligation eventually loses its warmth. The people who remain generous for decades are usually not the people who give the most. They are the people who know exactly where their generosity ends and where their self-respect begins. If you've spent years feeling guilty for protecting your time, saying no, or putting your own needs first, you're not alone. Many people were taught that self-sacrifice is kindness, only to discover that it often leads to resentment, exhaustion, and being taken for granted. That's one of the reasons I wrote a private ebook called The Art of Strategic Indifference. It's completely free and only available for viewers of this channel. It explores emotional independence, boundaries, validation, and the hidden ways people give away their power without realizing it. If this video feels familiar, you'll probably find something valuable in it. The link is in the description. The reason boundaries feel uncomfortable at first is because they force you to confront something many people spend years avoiding. Not everyone benefits when you become stronger. Some relationships are built around your willingness to overextend yourself. Some people have become comfortable with your constant availability. Some have quietly organized their expectations around the assumption that you will absorb the inconvenience. So when you finally begin protecting your time, energy, or attention, the resistance you encounter is not always evidence that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's evidence that the dynamic is changing. And that raises another important question. Why do some people react so negatively when your boundaries become stronger? Because stronger boundaries expose hidden expectations. When you always say yes, people rarely have to reveal how much they depend on your compliance. The arrangement feels natural, invisible. But the moment you say no, something becomes visible that was always there. Their reaction. Some people adjust without issue. They respect the boundary and move forward. Others become frustrated, guilty, offended, or disappointed. And that reaction often tells you far more about the relationship than months or even years of smooth interactions ever could. Because respect for your boundaries only becomes measurable when a boundary actually exists. What many people eventually discover is that kindness becomes powerful the moment it is no longer automatic. Think about the people you respect most. They are often generous, helpful, understanding. But there is something else about them. Their kindness feels intentional, chosen. It never feels like something you can demand. And that distinction matters because people value choices more than obligations. When your kindness is clearly voluntary, it carries weight. When it becomes predictable, regardless of how others behave, that weight begins to disappear, which suggests that respect may have less to do with kindness itself and more to do with the freedom behind it. Most people spend years trying to become kinder when what they actually need is a different relationship with their own value. If you believe your value comes from being useful, you'll constantly feel pressure to earn your place in other people's lives. You'll help when you're exhausted. You'll agree when you want to refuse. You'll keep giving because somewhere beneath the surface, usefulness has become tied to worth. And when that happens, kindness stops being an expression of who you are. It becomes a strategy for securing acceptance, which leads to a deeper question. What happens when your kindness is no longer driven by the need to be needed? When that shift happens, kindness becomes a source of strength rather than vulnerability. You help because you choose to, not because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. You become generous without becoming available to everyone. You become understanding without becoming easy to exploit. And perhaps most importantly, you stop viewing boundaries as barriers to connection. You begin seeing them as the very thing that protects healthy connection. Because relationships built on guilt, obligation, or endless sacrifice may survive for a while, but they rarely create genuine respect. And respect is what your kindness was searching for all along. There is another hidden reason kindness gets mistaken for weakness. Weak people often use kindness as protection. They learn that being agreeable reduces conflict, that being accommodating avoids rejection, that making life easier for everyone else helps them avoid difficult conversations. So when people encounter someone who is genuinely kind, they sometimes struggle to tell the difference. They are not asking whether you are kind. They are unconsciously asking a different question. If I push against this person, will they protect their boundaries or surrender them? And the answer to that question changes how they treat you. This is why true strength is not the absence of kindness. It is the ability to remain kind without becoming compliant. Most people think strength reveals itself when you're dealing with difficult people. Often it reveals itself much earlier. It reveals itself the first time you calmly say no without apologizing for it. The first time you refuse to explain a reasonable boundary. The first time you allow someone to be disappointed without rushing to fix their feelings. And for many people, those moments feel far more uncomfortable than open conflict. Which raises an important question. Why does protecting yourself often feel harder than helping everyone else? Because helping others is often rewarded immediately, while protecting yourself is not. When you help, you receive appreciation, approval, gratitude, or at least the feeling that you've done the right thing. But when you enforce a boundary, the rewards are delayed. In the short term, you may face disappointment, tension, or misunderstanding. And if you've spent years measuring your worth through other people's reactions, that discomfort can feel unbearable. Yet this is where a hidden form of strength begins to develop. The ability to tolerate temporary discomfort in service of long-term self-respect. And once you develop that ability, something surprising starts to happen. You stop attracting the same kinds of relationships. Not because human nature changes, but because your standards become visible. People who are only interested in your compliance often lose interest when compliance disappears. Meanwhile, people who genuinely respect you tend to adapt. They understand that boundaries are not rejection. They understand that your time has value. And over time, this creates a subtle but important shift in your life. You spend less energy managing people who only appreciated what you could do for them and more energy investing in people who appreciate who you are. The irony is that the moment you stop using kindness to earn respect is often the moment you start receiving more of it. Not because you've become less kind, but because your kindness is no longer carrying a hidden request for approval. People sense the difference. They sense when your generosity is a choice rather than a need. They sense when your help can be withdrawn if it is repeatedly abused. And that changes the dynamic. What once looked like weakness begins to look like strength because it is now supported by something your kindness was missing before. The willingness to walk away when necessary. But perhaps the most important shift is this. You stop seeing kindness as something that must be proven through sacrifice. For years, you may have believed that being a good person meant always giving more, tolerating more, forgiving more, and expecting less. But eventually you realize that endless sacrifice does not automatically create respect, loyalty, or appreciation. Sometimes it creates dependency. Sometimes it creates entitlement. And sometimes it creates relationships where your value is measured only by what you provide. Once you see that clearly, you begin redefining what kindness actually means. Kindness in its healthiest form is not self-abandonment. It is not the constant surrender of your needs to satisfy everyone else's expectations. Real kindness is the ability to care about others without betraying yourself in the process. It is generosity that does not require self-neglect, compassion that does not require compliance, patience that does not require tolerance of disrespect. And once you understand that distinction, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. The people who respect kindness most are often the people who know how to protect their own boundaries as well. Which leads to the final piece of the puzzle. What does truly strong kindness actually look like in practice? Truly strong kindness looks surprisingly ordinary from the outside. It helps when help is appropriate. It says no when no is necessary. It does not feel compelled to rescue every person from the consequences of their choices. It does not confuse guilt with responsibility. And it does not abandon its own needs in order to maintain approval. The strong person can be generous because their generosity is voluntary. They can be patient because their patience is not infinite. They can be understanding because they are not afraid of enforcing limits. In other words, their kindness exists alongside consequences, and that is exactly why people respect it. The final realization is that kindness was never the problem. The problem was believing that kindness alone would protect you. It won't. The world does not automatically reward good intentions. People do not automatically respect sacrifice. And boundaries do not appear simply because your motives are pure. What protects kindness is strength. The strength to say no. The strength to disappoint people when necessary. The strength to let others carry the consequences of their own choices. Because the moment your kindness is backed by that kind of strength, it stops looking like weakness. It starts looking exactly like what it was meant to be all along, a choice. And perhaps that is why the strongest people you meet rarely feel the need to choose between kindness and strength. They understand something many others never do. These qualities are not opposites. Strength without kindness often becomes intimidation. Kindness without strength often becomes exploitation. But when the two exist together, something different emerges. A person who is generous without being naive, compassionate without being compliant, respectful without surrendering their self-respect. And once you learn that lesson, you stop asking how to become less kind. You start learning how to make your kindness impossible to mistake for weakness. Most people spend years trying to solve this problem by changing their behavior on the surface. They try to become more assertive, more confident, more respected. But the deeper transformation happens when you stop measuring your value by how much you can do for other people. Because the moment your worth is no longer tied to being useful, available, agreeable, or endlessly accommodating, your kindness changes. It becomes calmer, stronger, more deliberate. And from that point forward, people no longer experience your kindness as something they can take for granted. They experience it for what it truly is, a gift that comes from strength, not a weakness that comes from fear. There is one final irony hidden inside this entire problem. The people who are most afraid of becoming selfish are often the least selfish people in the room. They worry about taking up too much space. They worry about disappointing others. They worry about whether their boundaries are fair. Meanwhile, truly selfish people rarely spend much time questioning themselves at all. And once you recognize that, something shifts. You stop treating every boundary as a moral dilemma. You stop assuming that protecting yourself requires becoming someone you're not. Because the goal was never to become harder. It was to become strong enough that your kindness remains a choice rather than a requirement. And that is the moment your kindness finally stops costing you your peace. And in the end, the question was never whether you should be kind. The real question was whether your kindness belongs to you or to everyone else. If it belongs to everyone else, it can be demanded, expected, and exploited. But if it belongs to you, it becomes something very different. Something chosen, something deliberate, something that can be given freely without being taken for granted. The moment you understand that, you stop trying to earn respect through sacrifice and start building it through standards. And that is when kindness becomes what it was always meant to be. Not proof of weakness, but evidence of strength under control. If this video helped you see that kindness and strength were never opposites, then you've already taken an important step toward a different kind of confidence. The kind that allows you to remain generous without becoming easy to exploit. And if you'd like to explore these ideas more deeply, you can download my free private ebook, The Art of Strategic Indifference, linked in the description. I'm curious, what has been the hardest boundary for you to set without feeling guilty? Let me know in the comments. If you genuinely found value in this video, consider leaving a like. And if you're interested in emotional independence, strategic thinking, human nature, power dynamics, discipline, and self-mastery, subscribe and continue the journey. The next recommended video expands on this philosophy and reveals another hidden dynamic that shapes respect, influence, and human behavior. And for those who want to explore these ideas at the deepest level, I've created a Patreon where I share private material specifically for serious students of psychology, self-mastery, and human nature. It contains observations, ideas, and psychological breakdowns that are intentionally not structured for public platforms. Think of it less as a membership and more as a private circle of thoughtful people who want to understand these concepts beyond surface-level advice. Both the free ebook and Patreon links are in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.